Hi, my name is Lee Jacobson. I'm Director of Events and Programs at the Seattle Chamber, and I'm excited today to bring you the Executive Speaker Series. We're recording today with 3 experts in the field. We're going to be talking about the maritime industry in our region. So before we get started, I do have some sponsor remarks. We want to thank our sponsor, Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions. And I have a quick video here to share.
My name is Mei-Ling Slaughter, and I'm with Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions, which is the wholesale benefits division of Newfront, a growing insurance brokerage that is a leader in the maritime industry. Our division works specifically with small businesses, providing employee benefits through associations such as the Seattle Chamber. Through this unique partnership, Seattle Chamber members have access to robust and affordable health insurance through a program called Business Health Trust. Whether you have 2 employees or more than 100, Business Health Trust can help you create a benefits program that attracts talent and keeps your employees healthy and productive at a budget you can afford. We offer exclusive choices from major regional carriers, including Premier Blue Cross and Kaiser Permanente, and offer employee benefits that go beyond health insurance, such as a 401k and other retirement resources, an employee discount program through Passport Corporate, and HR benefits through Archbright. If you'd like to learn more about Business Health Trust, please visit our website, businesshealthtrust.com. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy today's Executive Speaker Series.
All right, so thank you again to Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions and Business Health Trust. And now I am going to introduce our speakers and get started. So we have Dale Bateman, who is Associate Dean at Seattle Maritime Academy at Seattle Central College, Veasna, who is Program Director at the Youth Maritime Collaborative with Washington Maritime Blue, and Steve Metruck, who is Executive Director at the Port of Seattle. So as I said, experts in the field. I am just here today to ask questions, and they are going to share where the industry is now and what they see for the future of the maritime industry. So to get us started, if each of you could just briefly describe how your organization fits into the maritime ecosystem in the Puget Sound region. Steve, we can start with you.
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. The Port of Seattle operates two gateways. We operate an aviation gateway and a maritime gateway. And the maritime gateway is an important part of the regional economy. It's a big driver, and there's a few main parts of it. The first is our cargo industry, which is through our collaboration with the Port of Tacoma. We operate through the Northwest Seaport Alliance, which is responsible for about 20,000 direct jobs in the region, about $16 billion in business output, and makes us the 4th largest international cargo gateway. We've also made some investments there, but I'll be glad to talk about those in the future, keeping us as a key container gateway. We also own and operate Fisherman's Terminal, home of the North Pacific Fishing Fleet. We're responsible for about 1.4 in economic activity, more than 7,000 jobs related to the fishing industry. And then also, we are home to the largest cruise operation on the West Coast. And I can talk more about that, but for our cruise industry, prior to the pandemic, we had over 200 vessel calls and about $900 million in economic activity generated and about 5,500 jobs. And so those are the 3 main areas that we also operate a grain terminal, which helps with our exports of grain as well. So we're a big driver in the economic region and making those facilities and operating those gateways.
Great, thank you, Steve. Veasna, do you want to share?
Thank you for having me here. So my name is Veasna. I am the Program Director of the Youth Maritime Collaborative, and we are housed within Washington Maritime Blue, which is focused on building a sustainable blue economy. And our program is housed under workforce development, and the Youth Maritime Collaborative is comprised of maritime stakeholders, including the Port of Seattle, Seattle Maritime Academy, and a host of youth serving organizations, such as Sound Experience, Center for Women on Boats, and Seattle Public Schools, Highline Public Schools, as well as community-based organizations. And we are all working together to build awareness and training opportunities, internships, experiential learning events, all to create this idea that this can be an opportunity for educational career pathways for our young people.
Thank you. And then Dale, do you want to share a bit about your organization?
Absolutely. Thanks for having us here. I'm Dale Bateman, the Dean at Seattle Maritime Academy. We are a division of Seattle Central College within the Seattle College District. Our primary mission here at Seattle Maritime Academy is to train entry-level mariners and prepare them for a career at sea within the maritime industry. Our two primary programs train folks to be able seamen or to be qualified members of the engineering department, which are both the first level of qualification for folks working on ships. We train everyone from fresh high school graduates up to folks that are transitioning after a couple of years in a career, to some folks that have been doing something for 20 or more years and have decided that they don't want to sit behind the desk anymore and want to get out and do stuff with their hands for real, out in the sunshine with the salt spray in their face. And so they're transitioning a little bit later in life. Our students run the gamut of those individuals who desire to work at sea and need to get that first level of training to be able to go work on ships. And those are container ships, like Steve talked about. Those are tugboats. Those are the Washington State ferries. Those are small commercial passenger vessels like Uncruise and Lindblad and those small cruise companies, and everything in between. Our graduates are out doing those jobs out in the maritime industry.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to go off of my scripted questions just a bit because it sounds like there's so much overlap and connection in what the three of you are doing. So can you talk a bit about how you work together, or are there any partnerships that exist already or ones that we can facilitate on this Zoom today? Any of you can start.
Yeah, I'll start first. So we are very lucky to have funding from the port. We couldn't do this great work without resources. And so we're especially grateful for support from the Port of Seattle. I think that together we have an aligned mission to create equitable and inclusive opportunities. And to do that takes resources, it takes investment, and it starts at the top, with our commissioners to say, we want to invest in a diverse talent pool. We know the hard work that it takes to get there. And so we're really putting dollars to make it possible. So I think that's where we collaborate with the port. And with Seattle Maritime Academy, we are actually currently planning an experiential learning event, which will take place in a couple of weeks. And that will be a day where high school students will come and take part in really fun activities. And they'll be able to go into the vessel simulator room. They'll be able to go on a tugboat and get just a flavor of what it's like to be a part of this industry.
I think Veasna really identifies that really important partnership that we're creating, and the word that you had used, Lee, was this concept of an ecosystem, and it truly is that we function together in a symbiotic way within that ecosystem. That I am very much dependent upon Veasna and the organizations that she is representing and coordinating to generate interest in continuing into the maritime industry post high school, as well as providing then some opportunities for those folks that I have resources that any of those individual organizations can't possibly have because they're just so expensive. But because I have those, all of those youth maritime organizations can come and participate here at Seattle Maritime Academy in generating that excitement for the kids to think about maritime as a career. And if you don't know about maritime and haven't thought about going to sea as a career, when I show up your junior year of high school and say, hey, come to Seattle Maritime Academy, you're not as likely to. But because of the work that Veasna and her partner organizations are doing, people have heard of maritime and thought about maritime. And likewise, the work that the port is doing really is providing that strong undergirding that we need in order to do the hard work of diversifying the maritime industry. Without the support of business and organizations that the port can marshal in those directions, we would have an even steeper uphill battle.
So if I can just kind of add to our partner agencies, I mean, it really is an interconnected ecosystem of work. For us at the port, the workforce development is a key part of what we do and try to across both on aviation, maritime, construction, and green environmental work. And so, but the maritime is a really important part of that with our partners here to do that in advance. And there's a couple of reasons we do that. Is one, because it's necessary. There's an interest in that for us to make all parts of the maritime industry work, but also they're fantastic paying jobs, well above the average for these. And there's really high demand because there's actually the graying or the silvering of the workforce in maritime. But I think for us, it's kind of emblematic of the work in creating equitable opportunity is that for us, workforce development is in our Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, because we believe that's an important part of this, getting the word out there. And as we were discussing this, that saying is that, well, how are young people exposed to the jobs in the maritime industry? And we have to work really hard because even though there's water all around us, when I see the maritime industry, I see jobs and opportunities. Other young people would not know that is. And so I think the important work that we just talked about of creating those opportunities. And for us, we do that through internships. We also partner in other aspects with the Maritime Youth Collaborative. And we also are creating a Maritime Youth Career Launch Program that gets exposure through to get to these opportunities and then make those connections with businesses as well. So, and it really, it's a great thing to do, but it's also necessary for building a vibrant maritime industry of the future.
Wonderful. Thank you all. It sounds like there's a lot of really aligned goals with the three of you. So that's perfect. And I do want to talk more about the future of the maritime industry. But before we go there, let's look at the past a little bit, especially the last couple of years. We're coming out of COVID a bit now, but how was your organization and how was the industry as a whole impacted by the pandemic? Steve, you mentioned cruise ships. I know that was heavily impacted. Dale, I would imagine you had to maybe do some virtual versus in-person learning, but if you all could share what impacts you saw.
Sure. For us, we had a $900 million economic impact in 2019, and that went to zero in 2020. And so that had a large impact on the regional economy. We know that many small businesses, including those throughout the region in the city of Seattle, 50% of their income was coming during cruise season to do that. And that includes both small businesses, but also hotels and businesses as well. We know it's a big part of tourism. So to lose that was really unfortunate for us. We regained about 25% of that through work with our congressional delegation and also with our health and safety partners through Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And we got about 25% back. But then for 2022, we've responded and we have the biggest cruise season coming up with us. But that was a huge impact us, the loss, not only for our revenue stream of about $24 million, but for the businesses that were impacted by cruise. There were also supply chain issues, just to comment on the cargo side of things. Early on when in the pandemic, the ports of China exporting, they were shut down, the impacts in China. And then that created backlogs and other things that people are experiencing in the supply chain. And everybody knows about the supply chain now, and those were impacted throughout the region, especially if you were ordered a Peloton and it was on back ordered and it wasn't coming in, to do that. But we made the investment for us and actually gave us an opportunity to complete our construction on Terminal 5, which was the only opening of a cruise, or not of a cruise, of a cargo facility during the pandemic, which increased our capacity going forward. But the fishing fleet, we continued to support the fishing fleet to make sure that they were getting support for being vaccinated and other issues. So we want to continue to support our industry, but also with our tenants, we worked with them on deferring rent payments and other things to try to help them through the pandemic as well. So it took across the region working together to kind of adjust to those impacts from the pandemic.
Our impacts from COVID were really kind of in two directions. One, in the immediate, we had to go online for portions of our instruction, which was a significant challenge, and then bring folks back in to do the hands-on learning that's so critical and integral to our program, which meant that the 2020 graduates were graduating later, were starting their internships later than normal because they did online stuff in the spring when normally they would have been here in the schoolhouse doing all of those hands-on practical kinds of things. They had to come back during the summer to do those. Then the following year, the impact was that it reduced our class sizes. In order to be able to do in-person training, we had to reduce our class sizes in order to be able to have people spread out more here in the schoolhouse. That impact continued into this year as we weren't sure as we were going into the school year what it was going to look like exactly. So we ended up with some smaller numbers then as well. Perhaps the longer term impact was that a lot of the recruiting kinds of activities that we did were big events here on campus that 1,000 people were coming for Family Fun Day, or some of the other festival kinds of things that we did here on campus that introduced broad segments of the community to Maritime that they might not have been aware of before. Those didn't happen for 2 years, and we're beginning to see those impacts as we're registering folks for next year. We're seeing slightly lower numbers. So we've got opportunity now that we're returning to normal to have more students here on campus, but people don't know about the maritime industry as much and don't know that the school is here and ready to train people to begin their careers in maritime. And as Steve said, jobs that pay really, really well, but they don't know about them and don't know how to get to them, then we've got a gap in knowledge that we need to fill in. And we're beginning to do that again now that we can do in-person events again. But I think that's the biggest impact that I'm feeling right now from COVID was we didn't do in-person recruiting, and recruiting people to the Maritime online doesn't work nearly as well.
So I started my role 3 months before the pandemic, and that was fun. Also, I came into my role fairly new to Maritime. My background is in working with communities of color and focusing on, the achievement gap and workforce development, and really how to, focus on pathways to get out of poverty. And so that is what I brought with me in my relationships in the community. And when that pandemic hit, we just halted because we had all these plans with these experiential learning events, and the Youth Maritime Collaborative, they're all about holding events such as Sound Day, where hundreds of students would come and do all sorts of fun stuff to get exposure to this industry. And we couldn't do that during the pandemic. But like I said before, we knew the mission and we knew the goal, which was to work towards a more equitable and more inclusive environment for the maritime industry. And we pushed hard. We weren't going to give up on that goal just because of a global pandemic. And we focused on relationship building. We made phone calls, emails, we obviously met on Zoom. And the summer when we held our internship program, one of the great things was we got to really have that youth attention. Youth are very tech savvy, even though there is a digital divide with access to internet and having computers. Many students were logging in from their phones, and we had their attention. And we also have to remember this was during the time of George Floyd. And so this idea of racial equity and racial reckoning was very fresh and also very fragile. And we were able to really have these deep discussions, but also talk about this industry and these great opportunities. And so we were able to, twofold, build relationships with youth of color and youth from, we talk a lot about youth who are farthest away from opportunity. We were able to bring them in, get their attention. And then once we were able to start really building strong, trusted relationships, then we started to actually build out on even more exposure to opportunities in maritime. And so really used this, very, very challenging time and try to have a positive spin on it, knowing that our long-term goal was to, build a more diverse talent pipeline. And in order to do that was to just keep pushing, keep meeting during, our virtual meetings, and keep building out networking opportunities, these virtual networking opportunities. And the summer was incredibly successful. And then learning from that, and the following summer, we were able to meet in person, and just building off of word of mouth, just great times that people had within their programs, and then spreading that engagement through word of mouth. And that is how we're able to thrive during the pandemic.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've talked about the past. You kind of have set up where we are now. Let's look to the future. Thinking not just about your organizations, but the maritime sector as a whole. Where are the opportunities for growth? Where, I kind of split this question into two. What do you expect to see in the next couple of years in our region's maritime industry? And what do you hope to see for the industry if those answers are different?
I'll be glad to jump in.
Go ahead.
First, sorry. I was going to paint a bigger picture and then talk, about the other. But I think for us, one of the things going forward is, the maritime industry is an important part of Seattle and the state of Washington in the past, in the present, but we also want to make sure it's going to be there in the future. So for us, it's sustainability, making all of the maritime industry more sustainable going forward. That's on one aspect. Of course, making it more equitable opportunity is the other part of that. But for us, making sure the decarbonization of the maritime industry and leading with both on cruise ships and cargo is an important part of that, and working with our partners, because that will ensure sustainability of our operations going into the future, and then making sure that we make the infrastructure investments to keep those going as well. So for us, continuing to invest in our facilities, which are the enablers for those jobs in that industry. So for us, it's continuing to make the investments and creating that future, so there's a future that these good jobs can be there in the future.
And is that an expect or a hope or both?
Oh,
where are you in the process?
Well, we're in the process of doing these things. We're collaborating with partners, including Maritime Blue, the big collaborators on sustainable, being the center of innovation and working with like-minded ports and industry partners to advance that work. We've created the Northwest Ports Clean Air Strategy in collaboration with the Port of Vancouver Fraser, along with the Northwest Seaport Alliance, the Port of Tacoma, and ourselves on building towards reduction of greenhouse gases by 2050. So we are well on the way to undertaking these initiatives to keep the industry sustainable going into the future.
Great, thank you. Dale?
I think that the term sustainability is a really good one to focus this question. Steve talked about sustainability from the environmental perspective and those kinds of impacts. But I think sustainability for people is a really important one to look at as well. And the reality is that the maritime industry for forever has relied on word of mouth, and somebody in my family used to go to sea, so I'm going to go to sea too, which led to a not terribly diverse population. And we're seeing that wasn't a sustainable model as we move through the 21st century. And so as we talk about how do we build that sustainable system, it really is tied inextricably to diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we have to broaden the population of people that consider going to sea, because all the people that used to go to sea are retiring, and the graying and silvering of the industry that Steve talked about early on is very much true. Something close to 25% of the maritime industry that are actively going to sea right now are within 5 years of being retirement eligible. If you do that math, it doesn't work to have all those folks disappear, especially when the populations that have traditionally backfilled aren't necessarily wanting to go to sea anymore. And so we need to reach out to new populations and to new communities and build into them and the understanding that going to sea and working in the maritime industry can be a very lucrative profession, and that it is a profession that you can continue to hold throughout your life. It's not just, I went to sea and I worked on a fishing boat for a couple of years, but you can grow through whatever jobs you start in and truly have a lifelong career within the maritime industry. And so, to specifically answer your question, my hope is that we will begin to see here at Seattle Maritime Academy and through our training programs a much more diverse population and a shift in the way we deliver our training. Not that what we're teaching is going to change dramatically, though with technology that will certainly be the case, but that we're going to be reaching into communities and potentially providing training, some portions of it at least, where they are before they have to come up here to Ballard to my little campus. And so my hope is that we'll be able to do that. My expectation is, and I'm seeing this from my faculty and my staff, a creative approach to how we change what we do. For the longest time, maritime training was maritime training, and it had been that way for 100 years without any major changes. That can't be the case anymore. We have to change the way we train because we're training different groups of people and we're training in a different environment, especially as we modernize ships and as we change the way we do business with smaller crews and more technologically advanced vessels, and transitioning eventually to somewhat automated vessels that may not have very many people on them at all, but I need to train people how to operate them from shore. All of those things have to happen, and the idea of innovation becomes so important. The idea of the ship people being different from the shoreside people that work in the port, those ideas are going to have to go away. We're going to have to integrate our systems far more in the future, making the partnerships that we've already talked a little bit about even more important as the port upgrades its infrastructure. That has to integrate with brand new ships and new ways of operating those ships. And somebody needs to know how to do that. And that crosses straight through my classrooms as we train the next generation of maritime professional, whether they are mariners in the classic sense or not.
And can I ask a follow-up just on timing of that? So you said 25% are expected to retire in the next 5 years. How long is your program? Are you going to be able to replace that with the numbers that you're seeing now, or are we going to see a gap?
We're already seeing a gap. We're 5 or 6 years behind the power curve. And you look at Washington State Ferries specifically, and there's your case study. And we're seeing that throughout the rest of industry as well. Washington State Ferries, in a typical pre-COVID year, canceled something on the order of 45 sailings a year out of 150,000 due to personnel shortages. January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021, Washington State Ferries canceled more than 1,000 sailings due to personnel shortages. So we're already seeing those impacts. Can I by myself here at Seattle Maritime Academy fill that void and that gap? No, but we're contributing to fixing some of those gaps, doing the hard work that Veasna and her partner organizations are doing will begin to help fill some of that as well, because there are some folks that can come straight out of high school and maybe go straight to work without doing that additional year of training. And so together, we're beginning to fill some of that gap, partnering with other organizations throughout the region, and in particular maritime companies, to provide internship opportunities for my students and for some of the high school students to actually go out and work on boats in a training capacity. Those things are beginning to make a difference. But honestly, maritime awareness remains the biggest challenge. Again, if I show up your junior year of high school and you've never imagined yourself working on a ship, and I tell you about this really cool college program that I have, 1 year and you can make all this kind of money, most students are going to look at me and say, what else you got? Because they haven't imagined themselves working on boats. So it really is a matter of introducing a larger pool of people to the maritime community, introducing immigrant communities to working in the maritime. That's not something they've thought about. And a program like mine, which is 1 year, and it's sort of college, but not to a lot of people. A lot of these immigrant communities, the parents and the community leaders say, no, you need to go to college. You need to go be a lawyer. You need to go be a doctor. You need to go learn to program computers, whatever it is. You want to work on boats? No, that's a pastime. That's not a career. And so there's some significant challenges in reaching out to a lot of these communities. And Veasna can talk more about that and the work that her organizations are doing to help fix that problem.
Great. Well, let's go to you, Veasna. What do you expect and what do you hope?
Well, gosh, I think I expect further change, and just going on the theme of what everyone is saying is that we are experiencing a shift in the industry. We have already experienced a major gap, and we're facing a silver tsunami. So there's so much that has already occurred, and yet there's many variables that are continuing to occur. But what I think is that we want to be at the forefront of innovation, of change, of growth. We know that sustainability and tech innovation and focusing on the environment is something that is like our North Star. We want to be a leader in this industry the way that we have been, but we also want to be a leader in sustainability. And so when we talk about the workforce, it is not the traditional workforce anymore. We have to learn how to pivot. And we're doing that, as you heard from both Steve and Dale. And now it's really time to garner this attraction from populations that have never heard about these industry jobs before, don't have families, don't have the historical legacy that Dale was talking about. And how do we do that? How do we, bridge this gap from little to no knowledge to, inspiration and excitement and wanting to delve into this career? And we can't do that without relationship building and connection. And so when I think about what we do on a day-to-day basis is going out, we strengthen our existing connections within our stakeholder group, with our institutions, our schools, and our youth maritime organizations. And we also go out and expand partnerships with community-based organizations who have already built their credibility in community, decades over, and have the trust within community to come and share about opportunities in maritime. And they have welcomed us very well. We've been able to present to parents in the community because we know parents have an influence in shaping their children's future. We also focus on incentives, and that includes stipends. That includes ways to get from point A to point B, transportation, and that also includes language access. And so we include peer interpreters for those who actually need some assistance who have an English language barrier, need some assistance in interpretation. So we think about all these barriers and how to address them. And through that, we've been able to really build relationships, because without understanding what those barriers are, we can't really build those relationships. And we've had success, and we continue to expand our organizational relationships with community-based organizations and community. We've been able to increase the number of youth of color, both within our internship programs, but also within our partner organizations who are part of the Youth Maritime Collaborative. In addition to that, we've, relationship building is not just with community, but also with employers. We've been able to create a large stakeholder list of maritime employers, from startup companies to our old historical companies who've been around for 40, 50 years, shipyards. And they know the caliber of interns that we're sending over to them. And so they in turn want to return the following year and ask us, how can we host? How can we help? So again, I hone it down to relationship building and building trust and connections so that we have this ecosystem that works strongly together.
Thank you. And are you still looking for more partner companies?
Of course.
Always? Okay.
Yes. Anyone
we'll have a question at the end about what the community at large can do to support your work. So we'll come back to that. So just a couple more questions here to wrap us up. And you've all touched on this, but I just wanted to get into it a little more specifically if there's anything else you want to say. So we at the Chamber know that equity and access to opportunity for underrepresented communities is a crucial piece of our region's economic recovery as we come out of COVID. So is there anything else you want to say about how you're including these communities and how that's going to change the industry? Anything additional you want to share?
I would just say for us, it is fundamental for us, within our, we actually during this time period, during the pandemic, we revised our values to include anti-racism and equity as core to our organization. So within our organizational structure, it cross-cuts all that we do. So it's not a standalone endeavor. It's something that we look and try to focus within that. So, but I think that goes to, and I think you're seeing that growing consciousness of that, of making sure that it's connected, and it's not something on the sidelines. It's something that's made, that's there front and center that drives us. So I think that's for us in making that connection. We're continuing to look for opportunities to do that within that as we move forward and continue to say, no matter what part of it is, the part that we do, that we we bring an equity lens to that. And I think especially in workforce development and linking to those communities, as she was saying, is that really is important to make the connection to the community, because then in turn that gets you into the youth. So
yeah, I think that the idea that we're investing our resources in equity and diversity initiatives is so important. I have X number of minutes and dollars that I can spend on recruiting, and I am choosing to focus those efforts in ways to broaden the pool of applicants, because I can stay right here in Ballard and recruit from the folks that see us just down the hill quite easily. That doesn't require much effort on my part. But then I'm going to continue to draw from a shrinking pool of people, and it's going to continue to look like it has always looked in the maritime industry. By spending a little bit more time, quite selfishly, in the long term, my job will get easier because the time I spend today will pay dividends in the future, because then it will become just as easy to go recruit in lots of other places as it currently is here in Ballard. So short-term heavy investment pays some long-term dividends from a much more diverse population, which then, because the maritime industry is more diverse, it becomes easier to recruit a more diverse maritime industry. And so for me, it's really about the partnerships with Veasna and the Youth Maritime Collaborative. It gives me an in to communities that it would otherwise be very, very difficult for me to connect to, because I'm an outsider. And so building those relationships among those of us that are the practitioners to then build the relationships with those communities becomes so vitally important.
I think a lot of industries would do well with that mindset, but yeah, Veasna, what do you want to add?
I just wanted to add that we are very intentional too, not only with removing barriers and building partnerships and, working on trust building through our relationships, but also focusing on the experience itself, wanting to make sure that youth who go to these spaces that are predominantly white, and there tends to be a different culture or culture clash, if you will, that they have the tools and resources, both the youth and the employer. And we are intentional by providing equity trainings to employers beforehand at the start. So we have an orientation that we hold, and it's a 2-day orientation. It's very engaging, it's insightful, and the takeaways are, it's almost like you're not really attending racial equity training. That's when you actually are participating. We want to make it, like I said, really engaging, but also concrete takeaways that are offered as well, so that when the internship starts, the employer and the intern have already the tools and resources to address potential challenges in cross communication or potential scenarios that may cause miscommunication. And it's all offered in an overarching way that's positive and fun. And that really helps create this welcoming and inclusive experience. And I think that a lot of the interns have shared with us is that, without that training or orientation, their experience would have been much different. And the employer has also shared that with us as well. So it's very crucial to have that buffer beforehand and training that gives them a tool belt to work through some of those potential challenges.
Yeah, setting everyone up for success.
Yes.
I like that. Thank you. So last question, our audience for this is going to be the broader Seattle Metro Chamber membership and beyond. So you have a platform right now to talk to the greater Seattle business community. What do you want them to know about what you're doing and how can they support your work? Take it away.
I'll let my colleagues go first on that. Yeah, for sure.
So here at Seattle Maritime Academy, I think the biggest thing that I need for the business community of Seattle to understand is this is a very fragile state resource, that our funding is through the state and through the state college system, which doesn't, by its nature, necessarily fully understand what maritime means and the cost that attends that. This is an expensive school to operate in, and the traditional state model for how we do funding doesn't necessarily fully support that. And so there's need of some business support for even just the general operation of the school and finding those partnerships to be able to continue to do what we do here. We don't crank out huge numbers of students every year, but Washington State Ferries relies very much on us. The other maritime companies in the area rely very much on our graduates to fill their ranks. Weekly, I'm getting phone calls from around the country with people looking for graduates of a program like ours. So there's huge demand for these jobs. So the need to have a school like this in place has never been more acute than it is today. So financial support, directly financial support in supporting students who would be going here and providing opportunities for them once they've graduated to continue to work in the area are all ways that the local business community can support the Maritime. They rely on us, but we rely on them too.
So I have a couple asks as well. We are a small organization that always is happy to accept funding resources to support us in very hard work that we do, hard but rewarding work. The past couple of years have been so full of lessons learned that we have really built a infrastructure throughout the academic year into the summer to create a really amazing experience for students to get that opportunity to learn about maritime and possible educational and career pathways that they can pursue. And that includes after-school programs at our partner organizations, which prepares them for summer internships, and with maritime employers who we have been so excited to share that have actually offered employment to our interns. But we couldn't do that without continued resources and funding. So that's one ask. And then the second is to also, and this is something that's internal, is to, as we grow and diversify, is to maintain an openness to change and an openness to learning about diverse staff and youth who come from different cultural backgrounds, because there really is untapped potential. There is so much opportunity within the communities that we are working in and engaging with, and they can be our next leaders in maritime. And so we just hope that when you engage and hopefully host an intern, you will have that openness and help shape our future leaders.
For me, I would just like to say a couple of things to all businesses, which is, and I hope through these conversations you understand the importance of maritime industry. And really, for me, it's the maritime industry touches everybody's lives here in Washington State, whether they know it or not. And so, but I think a lot of people just assume it's going to function without any attention. And it takes a lot of hard work in order to keep the whole system And whether that be the supply chain, opportunities created through moving goods and services, or it means moving people as well, or it means creating opportunities or moving ideas. But it's an important aspect of the Washington state economy. And so general support for that and understanding of that it's, I've also heard, let me just say this really quickly, is the story of saying, engagement surveys like with stakeholders saying somebody on the east side was said, well, do you get it? What do you think about the Port of Seattle? And the response was, well, I don't need the Port of Seattle. I get everything through Costco. So that was not understanding of how goods and services and people move. It's you can't take that for granted, and it takes attention to that, and it also takes attention to support the elements to make everything work, and that includes support for our workforce development efforts. So that continuing support and that call for that support, we wholeheartedly ask other businesses to join us in that effort as well.
Thank you. Well, I certainly learned a lot today, and I hope that is true for everyone watching. This was a really educational and inspirational, I would say, conversation. So thank you so much to Steve, Veasna, and Dale for joining us today to share their experiences and expertise. A last thanks to our sponsors, Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions and Business Health Trust. And one last plug for the Chamber. If you enjoyed our program today and want to get more involved with what we're doing, head to our website, seattlechamber.com. You can become a member. And if you already are, you can sign up for mailing lists for our events and see what we have coming up. So thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.